Hello, everyone. Dr. Christine Smith back for a really cool interview for you today with Greg Kheel, who is a wonderful friend of mine and a teacher of Qigong, which is a form of energy work and learning how to move your own life force around. So it's a pretty cool practice, and it's all about learning how to tap into your energy and areas that need healing and how to feel into your muscles and your fascia and life force moving through and the magnetic field that we can actually create in our own system using this practice. And this practice is thousands of years old. There's many different versions of it, but when we can start to learn about these things, this is how we really tap into our own power, especially in an energetic way. And all of this matters for sustainability and lifetime and longevity and really helping to foster our life force, because that's really what Qigong means. Qi meaning life force and Gong meaning work. So it's life force work. It's learning how to move this around in your system. And, he had learned from a teacher of his from many, many years of practice who had kind of passed this down through the lineages. So I really wanted to bring him on to talk about some of the history of it and just talk about his experience with it and what it actually feels like to move this kind of thing through your body. And in all of this, there's so many different ways to practice it and so many different styles. And some people may have gone to, like a Qigong class at their local community center or something, but it can be incredibly different when you're learning from someone who has really practiced under mastery. So hello, Greg. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to see you.
Good to see you, Dr. Christine. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you. I was just telling everyone a little bit about you and a little bit about Qigong and just kind of what we wanted to talk about today. But I'd love if you could introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about you and how you fell in love with this work.
Amazing. Thank you. Yes, so my name's Greg Kheel. I was born in Florida and started around the age of 20 traveling around the world. And, I was always been big into fitness and exercise, started doing a lot of weightlifting, really injured my body in a lot of ways, and flexibility was basically non-existent. So then got more into like calisthenics. I was doing that for many years. Amazing, still lacking a little bit of flexibility and mobility. Then got big into yoga. Did yoga for many years, moved to Bali, lived off of coconuts and did yoga every day, did that. I felt super flexible, had a lot of energy, but felt physically very weak. Like I'd bump a wall and be like, ow, that hurt. You know what I mean? So I feel like I was losing a lot of mass. But again, I was basically living off coconuts for a while, went vegan. That went down a whole nother the story. And then that's when I started learning about Qigong. So I had tried a little bit of Qigong there, some other places in Asia. And then as I continued to travel around the world, Qigong really, something about it just really sparked my interest. I was like, wow, it's very different. It was bringing in a lot of the elements of yoga, but in a completely different way, right? So I started in my travels around the world, practicing with different teachers around the world. And just like yoga, there's hundreds of different forms of Qigong. And found my teacher a little over a decade ago. And, when I found him, I was like, this is the practice. And yeah, really dedicated many years of training intensely with him. I still train with him to this day, just not as intensely. So now I've started training others over the last 5 years. I originally there was never my intention to I want to be a Qigong teacher, right? But I went deep into this practice. I was doing 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours a day, every morning, first thing in the morning. And it just changed my life, opened my eyes in so many different ways. The connection with my body, connection with my breath, so many different elements just really sparked within me. And then when I would just talk about it and tell others, they'd be like, wow, this is amazing. I got invited to like teach or do like a showcase or a workshop at different events around the world. And then people would start coming up to me, wow, this practice is amazing. How can I learn more about this? I was like, okay, yeah, I can show you a little bit. So a little over 5 years ago when I started training people, and yeah, it's just really taken off. It's all been through word of mouth of everybody that I'm working with. And just to continue to see the life transformations that happen through the practice just really inspires me to keep sharing the magic, and also keep exploring. And I think, Qigong is thousands of years old, though it doesn't have that same gravitas that yoga has really taken off with. And I feel like this next wave is Qigong kind of re-emerging, and all of the elements and science and, all the stuff that you're big into really starts coming together that starts to make sense.
Absolutely. Well, and it's like thousands of years old practice that generations upon generations have figured out movements of what taps into the energy of the body in the best way.
Mm.
And I know, like, I have been learning from some of the students that you've taught, and it's really fun to see like everyone's different take on it and variation. So just before I kind of dive into learning about like the history of it and stuff a little bit, I'd love if you could share what some of those kind of profound transformations or epiphanies were that you had when you started really implementing it in your life.
Mm. One, I would say just energy levels just really picked
Mm.
up, and strength and mobility in the body became like the coherency of, and just the way I can move my body was beyond anything I've experienced in any other practice. Um, yeah, and like I said, to me, ultimately, the biggest thing was connection to the body, like a way of really connecting to your body, and literally becoming your own medicine. Really tapping into why when we touch ourselves in different ways, what's really going on. And like subconsciously we do that. Like if you have a headache, subconsciously you'll put your head on your headache. If you're exhausted, you put your hands on your kidneys. If you have a stomach ache, you'll put your hands on your stomach. You're creating that feedback loop, right? Like those meridians are like energetic communication lines, and when you create that connection with different parts of the body, it's able to send different signals and communicate like what's going on. And it's like allowing your body, giving it the foundation for it to go in and adjust, and really going to like self-calibration, recalibration of your own body.
Ooh, I love that, because I talk about body work and chiropractic and all of those kinds of things as a recalibration of the body and of the nervous system. So with this work, then we can start to really learn how to recalibrate ourselves. And I'm all about sustainable health and teaching people how to be their own authority in that realm. And so this is one of those ways that you can do it. I love that. So can you tell us like a little bit about the history of Qigong? Because it's thousands of years old. And I know there's like different types and different understandings of it. I love if you could just expand on that for us.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, Qigong goes back thousands of years, and from my understanding, there was three main sects of Qigong. So there was like Shaolin, which is probably the most well known around the world. Then there's Wu Dang, which was I think they're probably the most taught around the world. And then this other practice, Ulmei, which was from the Ulmei Mountains, where they have like the largest carved Buddhas in the world, are Mount Ulmei. And there's these huge Buddhas, like some are even unfinished. And I mean, I've heard different stories that it was kind of there were some transitions. Originally, a lot of the Qigongs were about peace and vitality, and then it kind of the Shaolin took it into a little bit more of a combat art, and then it kind of transitioned. And yeah, I'm not sure what happens, but I know there's been um, times where a lot of these practices have been forgotten. I'm trying to think of
Well,
ways to say it, but
and I
go
think
ahead.
I talked to you at one point and you said some of them had even almost been wiped out at different times.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, from my understanding and what I've heard, it's like when I think it was about 800 years ago, the Shaolin trained the emperor's army,
Mm.
and before that, all the sects were about peace and harmony and vitality, and how to really embody that vitality. And then whenever, now in the modern era, the last 1,000 years of humanity to me has really been about domination, right? Really that masculine energy of like my way, this way. And then it kind of went into, okay, this is the same thing that what happened in religion. They kind of wiped out all the witches, kill all the witches, and any non-believers or whatever other people are thinking, and went into a more controllable manner. It's really hard when you can heal yourself and you energize yourself and literally nourish yourself through your practice. Um, yeah, it's a powerful thing. So I don't know if
Absolutely.
that kind of says, I mean, I don't know a lot. My teacher barely spoke English. So a lot of the translations and information I've learned has been through other teachers and practices and downloads from around the world.
I love that. And you know, anything where it's an art form that teaches us how to empower our own life force that's almost been wiped out, that's stuff I like to learn. I think it's just keeping old history alive of
Yeah.
really powerful things. So that's one of the reasons I've gotten into it myself and why I wanted to have you on to talk about this, because I think a lot of people don't always know about these practices and what's available. And some people are like, I kind of like yoga, but I don't really like yoga. But this one's different because it definitely has like a different structure to it, but it can be done in so many different ways because I've practiced with you and practiced with some of your colleagues, and like you guys have different styles of movement, even though it's within the same practice. So there's a lot of ways to get creative with it, but it's more of like a standing and breathwork type practice. So for anyone who, you know, sometimes wrist stuff is painful in yoga, then you don't have to be on your hands and you can actually strengthen your hands through this practice. I've referred a couple of my clients as some of your teachers that you've trained for the sake of helping with something like osteoporosis, right? Because it's weight bearing, but you're creating the weight with your own muscle tension. So it's a very safe way to do it. And then, you know, starting to learn how to move energy around to heal different injuries or different organs and all that kind of stuff. So for the type and style that you practice, what are some of your favorite pieces about it?
Well, I think to me is the basics, like super basic things. Like our mind is masculine, so we push up. So when you're constantly pushing up with the crown of your head, it takes a lot of that stress out of the spine, especially the lower back. And you see a lot of people that are having these, you know, inflammation. What is inflammation? It's caused by compression. There's too much compression at a joint and causes it to inflame and swell up and then cause irritation, right? When you're pushing up with the crown of the head, and then that with a combination of relaxing, so the soles of the feet would be like the feminine, right? And the soles connect to the earth, which is the feminine, and the masculine, our mind, connects to heaven. So when you kind of create that separation, it allows space within the spine and within all the joints because you're actually creating that lift. And you know, I remember years ago I was talking with my mom. She was getting up off the couch and she was kind of like, oh, like that. And I was like, Mom, try something, try something. I said, go ahead, sit back down. I was like, okay, now try to get back up. But when you go to get up, don't push with your legs or your back. Inhale and push up with the crown of your head. And she sits back down and she goes, and her eyes just lit up wide. And she was like, and then she just repeated it like 3 or 4 times. She's like, she's like, why didn't nobody ever tell me this? You know, it's such a basic little movement that changes everything, you know. And I've worked with clients that have had back pain, especially a lot of stuff in the lower back pain for 20 years. And they've tried surgeries, injections, rehabs, all types of exercises. Nothing's helped. They get into this practice and within 3 to 6 months, they're doing things they thought they would never do again. You know, completely reversing and readjusting a lot of the states. And to me, it's just about giving the body space. Well, one, connecting to the body. So you're allowing for those, your immune system, all your stem cells to really activate for your body. Your body is the most advanced compounding pharmacy on the planet, right? It can produce all its own stem cells, whatever the body needs, it can create. But you got to give it that communication for it to have that ability to listen. And so when you have that ability to listen to the body, create that space, and then learn how to move, it's just that's when amazing things can happen.
It's kind of creating the time and space to have the right signals sent so that you can create your own biochemistry and move your own life force around.
Yeah.
Love that. So when you're doing this, like, what do you experience when you're moving your life force around? Because I think it's a very intangible thing for a lot of people. And especially if you haven't really done different practices or work around kind of feeling your own energy field, which, you know, for anyone who is in doubt that we have an energy field, let's just reflect on the fact that we can measure brain waves with a magnet that doesn't touch your head. So you emit your own Wi-Fi. Heart Math Institute has studied this stuff. Your heart emits its own magnetic field. Same thing with the idea of chakras, right? They are basically coming from a field created by charged particles in motion from neurons that are sending signals, because all of our chakras are associated with neural ganglia, which are like collections of neurons. So if you have a bunch of neurons all sending charged particles in motion, which is like a battery, and you have a bunch of them together, it creates a bigger magnetic field. And this is why we have these magnetic fields at different points in our body, and they can all accumulate so we can expand and move our magnetic field. So in this, like when you're feeling it, because I think that hearing how other people experience it allows people to get creative and figure out how they experience it, because different people experience things differently. Some people see colors or things like that. Some people hear tones. Some people feel kinesthetically or tactilely. Like I'm definitely more of like a kinesthetic person. And I feel an energetic field. It's almost like I can feel resistance when I'm tuning into it, but my mind has to be focused on it, because your mind is the director of that energetic field. So in your experience, when you're practicing, what do you feel in your body?
I love how you said everybody experiences it so differently. And that's definitely been my experience through teaching hundreds, if not thousands of people over the years. Everybody has it different, completely different. And to me, it's a charge. You're creating a charge. Like energy is inner chi, right? How much energy you have is how much inner chi you have. And whenever you can boost that up, you feel it. And some people may feel it as an energy boost. During the practice, to me, it's about creating that charge. You feel it in 1,000 different ways, from the body opening up. You feel mobility within the body and just this strength and power within the body. One thing that I experienced, because you've done this practice, so you know a little bit firsthand, you're holding your breath while you're going into movement, which is really about extending the body and creating like force as you're moving. And what that's doing to me is like it's creating pressure within the body. And so that pressure is moving through, imagine your meridians, or imagine even your veins. Imagine your veins are like little water hoses going through the body, and you're pushing that. Like if you put like a little bit of pressure of water going through, it's going to kind of trickle out. But if you put a lot of pressure through the hose, like that thing's going to move. And so your body can experience it in a way of, oh, wow, feeling movement, just feeling more powerful. Some people, like you said, can see it. In this practice, 90% of the exercise is done with our eyes closed, and we focus seeing with our mind's eye. And the way I was taught is it takes about 2 years of daily practice to where you can really get into seeing with the mind's eye. But it's really interesting, because even that differs with everyone. And I always walk everyone through a little exercise where you focus on seeing your hand with your eyes wide open, and if you slowly start to close your eyes, still focusing on the outline of your hand, and then close the eyes completely and still focus on the outline of your hand. Focus on seeing the outline of your hand as light or color. Slowly open. And you'll notice when your mind is focused on seeing, it's unable to think about anything else. The mind is very much focused on seeing and kind of mapping out that connection of the hand, right? So some people see that very quickly. Some people it takes longer. It depends on, who knows, a lot of different variables and factors.
Yeah, and I think about like the research that people like Dr. Joe Dispenza do of the same thing, of helping the mind focus and get into a bit of an alpha brainwave state through proprioception, which is like outward sensing of the environment around you, and then interoception, which is like sensing of inside your own body. And when we're focused on those things, it occupies our mind in such a way that we really can't be busy in cognitive thought. Like if you try to do that and do math at the same time, it's really hard. So it's like it's one of exactly, yeah, it's one of those things that fully occupies the mind and starts to change your brainwave state. And then I also was thinking about what you're saying about breath, and breath is our blood chemistry monitor. And so like we use our breath to change our blood chemistry and acidity levels and all of that. So if you're doing this practice and you're holding your breath, you're breathing at different times throughout the practice, at the same time that you're moving this pressure around and you're moving your energy around, you're literally changing the chemistry of your blood just with your breathing, in addition to whatever else you might be focusing on. And I know that in this practice, you can kind of move the energy around to different organs or different areas that need healing. So like, how do you feel this all plays a role in healing and health on a physiology level?
Beautiful question. I'm currently exploring this book called Breathe. I don't know if you're familiar with it. James Nestor. There's a book
I
called
know of
Breathe.
it. I haven't read it, but I've heard good things.
I'm about halfway through it, but it's reminding me of so much stuff in the practice that this is starting to make sense. Why all the benefits? And he was talking about all these different studies that some of them were 30, 40 years old. These studies where they were testing how people breathe, and so the rate at which they breathe and the quantity of air that they're breathing in, and then in relationship to their health. And what they were finding was people that actually breathe more are usually sicker. And that was relating a lot with like carbon dioxide, the level of carbon dioxide that you have within your exhales. The more carbon dioxide, usually the more healthier the person was, right?
Wow.
So it's less about breathing, and it's, you could see it almost like if you're breathing a lot, your body's trying to work overtime to try to, and when you actually can slow the breathing down, the body can able to go in and like assess what's going on. But I think a lot of people were so much in so much stress in our life right now, and so disconnected from our own bodies, that a lot of us, okay, when something goes wrong in the body, okay, let me go ask Dr. Google. Okay, let me go find a practitioner that specializes in this. And, you know, the last thing we do sometimes is look inward. Like, okay, something's going on with my elbow. Let me spend some time with my elbow,
Let me
right?
talk
Like,
to it and ask it
let
some
me,
questions.
yeah. Well, I'm a big believer about really going into the present moment, especially in the practice. So I always tell people, like, let go of the stories, you know, because I feel like every time we repeat a story, it's like placing a story on a building. It's much harder to knock down a one story or a 30-story building than a one-story building. So every time we repeat a story, okay, my elbows hurt because of this. My elbows hurt. We're just repeating, and what the mind sees, the body follows. So if you're constantly repeating the story that your elbow is injured because of X, Y, Z, you're not getting your body to heal. You're getting it to stay in that stagnant point of view because that's the story you're sticking to, right? And it's also letting go of any future potential. I need you to heal, elbow. This is what I think you need to do. It's like, no, no, no. Just go into that pure presence, closing your eyes, connecting to your elbow, seeing your elbow, focus on seeing your elbow's light and color. And with that connection comes like this level of interpretation where the body starts communicating and can listen to these signals. And then that's when, like I said, the calibration starts coming in, because you're actually being present, just like us talking right now. If I was trying to do 100 other things, I wouldn't be able to be present with you. The more present with you I am, the more information that comes through in so many different ways. And it's the same with our own body. When we're hyper present with our body, that's where the magic happens, you know?
Absolutely. And I love, there's a couple comments coming in. Someone said, don't make it about where you feel the pain. I think that is definitely an
Mm.
interesting perspective. And so it's like, there's a saying we used to say in school of the doctor that chases pain is lost, because usually pain does not necessarily the source.
Yeah.
And then someone else said, I find myself holding my breath, perhaps my subconscious body trying to protect itself.
Mm.
And yeah, that can be an interesting thing. That can come from a lot of different areas. But, you know, if we're holding our breath, it can also mean that maybe we're in a little bit of a stress state. Because I think when you're also talking about breathing, you're talking about like the amount someone breathes. But I think we're talking about like rapid breathing, where it's not deep breathing, it's more shallow. And then you're not getting that depth of oxygen carbon dioxide exchange. Whereas if you're taking deeper breaths and belly breaths, you're breathing slower, you're breathing less, but you're breathing more effectively, and you're affecting different neurological receptors, because we have parasympathetic, like rest and digest, nervous system receptors in our lower lungs, and we have sympathetic, like fight or flight, in our upper lungs. Because when you're running from the tiger, you're breathing a little bit more shallow, versus when you are, trying to go to sleep, you're usually breathing some deep belly breaths. And I love this practice too for anyone who's kind of resistant to meditation, because a lot of people are resistant because they have to sit still, or because their mind, like when you do sit still, your mind brings up everything that you're anxious about. And there's important things about the practice of meditation, of like learning how to void your mind while sitting still without something else to focus on, which is its own exercise. But this is its own form of meditation as well, that's connected to movement and connected to having something to do and to focus on. So for anyone where they're kind of resistant to that, this could be a really cool thing to explore. And I'm curious, like in your work, what kind of transformations have you gotten to see in your clients through this?
I mean, everything and anything. Definitely mobility, I think would be a big one. A lot of people don't, I don't think they come to me for this, but get a lot of comments, people healing a lot of lower back pain, structural issues that they feel they've kind of given up on a lot of things. Like, okay, I'm gonna have to live with this for the rest of my life. And they're like, oh my God, that's gone. Definitely rising energy levels, better body, better skin, um, everything. I've become a better dad. I've become a better husband. It's you become present. Once you become present with yourself, you become present with your surroundings, your family, your friends, your environment. It helps you slow down. And when you're talking about that level of stress that I think most people are in, when you learn to kind of relax your body, you're almost putting your body, I would say, in a little bit of stress, like through the breathing and the movement of the practice, but you're learning to stay calm in that stress, like always staying relaxed, and when you stay at that point of relax, after your practice, when you go out into the world, you're able to stay emotionally centered and stay balanced, and other things don't trigger you. I've worked with CEOs that have 100 employees, and sometimes they would get a little stressed when everybody's coming to them with questions, whereas now they relax, they can stay emotionally centered, not react through their breathing, through their movement, how they're holding themselves, and then delegate much more effectively and efficiently. So I've seen full spectrum of results, and to me, it's the practice will align you, and then everything that you do will improve based on that. And you become so much more efficient and effective with the hours that you work.
Absolutely. What's been one of your favorite stories of your clients or kind of transformations you've gotten to facilitate?
What, like, to me, it's also like how much you put into the practice. Like, obviously, the more you put in, the more you get out. This is definitely a practice where that's the case. Where now, like, if I'm working with someone privately, if they're not able to dedicate, ideally a half an hour to an hour, minimum 4 or 5 days a week for this practice, I would say whenever you're ready to do that, let's do that. Because this practice, when you put that level in, that's really where I see the most incredible results. And like one client who I think that you're training with, Travis, he was in between right when he started training. So he had the time to really dive deep into the practice. And I mean, complete body transformation, his mindset, his energy, stress levels, like one of the most incredible transformation that I've seen so quickly. Like literally every time I would see him, it would just be different, like shedding weight, like the way he acts and reacts. It was just such beautiful to see that, like your presence of how you hold yourself. And then other people as well telling me like, wow, it completely changed his life. So seeing that, yeah, and like now I'm working with some clients in different groups where I have people in their 80s that have never done any type of qigong practice, and it's like for them connecting. Like imagine being in your 80s for the first time, feeling like, wow, like why? Again, just like my mom, why has nobody told me about this? Like imagine if some of these elements were taught in schools, how different the world would be. How different we would kind of value our health and our presence and, yeah, our potential.
Well, and I love that in this practice, someone who's in their 80s or 90s or whatever can do this, because it's pretty gentle on the body.
Mm.
You can make it pretty intense depending on the amount of engagement you
Mm.
choose to do. But you can start very gently. So if you're in a place where you can't really exercise, or you're chronically ill and you need to get movement, you need to get that energetic flow, but you can't necessarily do something that like biking or running, or that starts to move that in your body. This is a really gentle way to be able to do that while still giving your body some of the same benefits, in addition to the energetic focus, which is like a whole other layer of benefit. So yeah.
100%. I really, the way I practice is, or teach the practice, like, okay, you have your practice, and it can be modifiable for anyone. Like different people that, like this person that could barely walk, like I'd help them in a different way of someone in their 20s, 30s that they're looking for full vitality, full. I've worked with a lot of athletes that are increasing their performance in whatever sports, from surfers to hockey to football to boxers, like, and all of them seeing improvements in their skill set. Um, but one thing is like, okay, you have your practice, but I want you to take the elements of the practice, how you stand, how you breathe, how you move, how you react, into every other aspect of your life. And that's when really the practice becomes your life. And you're able, like, I'll be gardening, and the way I move and breathe while I'm gardening is like the same I do in my Qigong practice. And really, I love to speak. My teachers taught me a lot in metaphors. Like I did communicate, it'd be a lot in metaphors. And one of the biggest questions after people go through my program: how much qigong should I do every day from moving forward? And it's like there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. How big of a house do you want? My teacher always said, like, you know at the first 3 to 6 months, you're building your house. After that, you just have to maintain your house. And like, if you just want a little beach shack to like kind of feel good in, be mobile, be able to do stuff, it's not going to require a lot of maintenance. If you want a huge house holding a lot of chi, where you have a lot of vitality, or maybe you want to teach others, or you want to help heal, or you want to give your chi away, you need to be constantly restocking the reserves. Takes a lot more maintenance for that,
That's
you
a
know.
very good way to put it. I really like that. So it's like, it's just about, yeah, how you want to be able to show up in your life and how much capacity you want to have. So really, this is a practice that builds your own personal capacity
Mm,
for your life force and for your vitality and for your ability to pour from the pitcher without it emptying.
yeah, for sure. And we all go through phases of life. There'll be some years, okay, this year I want to add a second floor onto my house. So you may kind of be at that plateau level, and then all of a sudden one year you're like, all right, I'm ready to do an addition. Or opposite. You may come to a year, okay, this year I'm going to take off the second floor. I just want to have a real chill, calm year this year. So it's up to you, really, kind of how you delve into the practice. But to me, it's like an endless spring that just continues. The more you want to take in, the more practice you do. It's amazing.
Well, and I love what you were saying about athletes, because I work with some professional athletes and I think about them on the road all the time, right? Which is a little
Mm,
hard on your
yep.
system. And they're competing, and it's like when you're a professional athlete and you're competing in a game, you're basically like entering a nervous state, like you're
Mm,
entering a battle on the regular. And so like this is such a good practice for being able to reground and recenter and recalibrate your energy, like you were saying. And even like someone had commented that, the microbiome is a huge part of all of this. And I would care to argue that this kind of practice actually can alter your microbiome itself, just like altering your microbiome through eating the right nutrients can alter your ability to feel your own life force. So I think they're complementary. But just like a quick question back to the athletes, what's one of your favorite transformations that you've gotten to see in some athletes that you've worked with, especially with like just ramping up their abilities and their performance?
I think one of the biggest one I see is how they react in a stressful situation.
Mm.
They're able to stay so much calmer in whenever it's that intense point. Like for surfers, it's that point where they're stuck under a barrel. They're underwater, and usually they can go into a little bit of a panic. Now they're able to stay much more calm. Or other athletes, whenever they're on timed things, like for sprinters or for runners, or things that are down to that last minute, things are getting really stressed, able to stay much more calm. And then again, you react way more effectively. You know, your brain is not going to that fight or flight, so your decisions are laser focused. So you're able to make much more appropriate adjustments in how you move, how you react to different things.
So on the field, it kind of takes you out of the mode of feeling like prey and puts you more into predator.
Yeah,
So I like that. It's like that.
100%. That's a good way to put it. I like that.
Yeah, because that's how I kind of think about those nervous system states, right? Like fight or flight, we need it like for survival
Yeah.
and being able to amp up our system when we need to. But if you let it overpower you, then we're like, we get into that state of feeling like prey and looking around and feeling scattered versus that like using it in a way that's highly intentionally focused, which is essentially what this practice is, right? It's practicing how to hyper intentional focus on something so that it's familiar to your nervous system and to your brain. And then, yeah, that's a much more productive state when you're trying to do something like a sport. So I love that. Thank you. And, you know, I guess if there was anything that you wanted people to know about working with their life force and energy work, what would you want them to know?
Balance is key. I mean, to me, the more I go into my own practice, the more I realize balance and the importance of balance. Like some of the things we were talking about, like about breathing. We were talking about, should we breathe like more or less, like breathing less, or should we breathe more, like the kind of over oxygenation of the body? To me, any extreme is just chasing the other extreme, right? It's always about harmonizing and finding balance and clearly seeing all the perspectives of the world. You know, I met with one old Chinese master teacher, and he was telling me how, you know, the more he goes into life, I think he was probably in his 80s when we met, and he was telling me how the more I go through life, the more I realize balance is in everything. Like no matter anything into extreme, like going extreme into your qigong or extreme into any aspect is going almost in the opposite way, you know. So it's like how can we find balance, how can we constantly find that middle way, that middle path of not going into extreme. And it's like then you learn from both sides of the coin, right? You're not just kind of getting one side, you're learning the best from this side and from this side, and then you calibrate and grow from that. And that's where I see the most growth within myself. I feel like for sure in life I've gone to one extreme and then gone back to the other, and then constantly kind of learning to go less and less and then gain more and more through that practice.
Hmm. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, I think that's a very good way to put it. And yeah, figuring out what balance is for each of us individually is an individual journey. And, you know, I work with a lot of clients where they'll be like, and even myself, like a very robust person, and they go through some kind of health crisis or experience or injury or toxic exposure or toxic relationship or whatever. And then all of a sudden their resilience is completely different, and your balance and what your body considers balance and what it needs to be balanced changes. And so it's like this is one of those practices that you can always turn to find balance. And even in my own life, like as I'm learning this, I love it, but also it's helped me get back into my yoga practice. And now I'm kind of blending the two and feeling like the difference between them, but also feeling how my life force moves through it. And that's a balance for me, right? And then I also balance it with dance because that's just something I love doing. And so it's like finding what that balance is in your life. But I also value diving deeply into something and deeply into a practice for a period of time to really get familiar with it. So all of that can be considered balance in its own way. And it's about finding what's right for you.
100%. And I think it's so true. It's so different from every single one of us. And I think ultimately it comes back to really connecting with yourself. And it seems, I think, who did I hear one time talk about it? Like, oh, I think they were talking about, I was listening to meditation. Is what? I just look at my belly button, like, what's happening? Like, it goes, but there is so much that's happening. Like, just going into that connectivity sometime and quieting the mind and really, like you said, getting it laser focused, so much is actually happening. And whenever we can get ourselves to slow down, it allows us to kind of recalibrate and have that reconnection to not only tap into like physically what our body needs, but emotionally what our body needs. Or, you know, like, all right, what are my goals? If you're stuck at something, you can kind of recalibrate and completely readjust. And when you watch people, whenever they're kind of sunken down like this, their mind is usually kind of all over the place. When you see someone at attention, their spine, they're aligning their spine and opening up the spine. And when you erect the spine, you know, really giving it space, erect the spine, you're erecting the mind's able to be laser focused, right? So align the spine, align the mind, you're focused, you become much more attentive, and you're able to figure out what you want rather than just be like, okay, it's like, you're just a pancake.
And I have people tell me, they're like, I fall asleep when I meditate. And I'm like, are you laying down? Because I fall asleep when I lay down too. So it's like, yeah, it's really different going through these practices in a posture that's at attention. And,
Yes.
you know, even practicing Qigong has changed the way that I
Mhm.
dance. And I was just hanging out with two of your students who are some of my teachers, Dan and Travis, and they were talking about just kind of giving me an energetic sense of things. And like in some of the movements, you know, Dan was talking about, okay, like in this movement, you're actually pulling all the energy in the universe of what you want toward you and into your body. And in this movement, you're holding your own life force in your own energy field. And in this movement, you're feeling your own magnetic field that you're creating. And so it's like having a really good teacher like that, I think makes a huge difference, because it helps you tap into things that are really hard to find on your own. Like ultimately you probably can find it on your own, but having someone to guide you and transmit that those downloads and that knowledge and that energy makes a huge difference. So I know like you teach a lot. If people wanted to learn more about you, or they wanted to work with you, or they wanted to dive into this work, where would you send them?
Yeah. So on the website, Qiveda.com, that's Qiveda.com. That's where we're going to be hosting a lot of the groups, a lot of the group practices. You can reach out to me there for one-to-ones. This year, we'll definitely be launching a lot more things on there. Be on the lookout. Or find me here on Instagram at Real Greg Kheel, Kheel, and touch base with me, and yeah, we can kind of look into how we can work together.
Amazing. Thank you. And, you know, for anyone who's interested in this, or you have any questions, like please comment below after this is posted, and we will answer your questions and help you find the right things, because really, like, we do this for you guys. We just want you to know all the things that are out there that you can be empowered by, and take back control of your own health and your own body and reconnect with yourself. Because I think in the way that our world is going right now, it creates a lot of feelings of disconnect, and we're not even completely aware of that. We just know that it feels like something's missing, or like we're missing some joy, and we're not quite sure where it is, or we're not feeling connected to our life force, to our body. And that's what these practices are for, is it's helping you like feel reconnected to yourself and to your life, and kind of going through a little bit of a transformation. So if that's something that you're seeking, I highly encourage you to just try it out, check it out. He does group programs, stuff like that. If he's busy, Dan and Travis are wonderful teachers as well. So yeah, comment below, ask us questions, and we'll make sure to answer. And if you guys are interested, we can always do another talk like this that's a little bit more advanced, maybe with the four of us chatting as well. So let us know what you think. And thank you so much for making the time to do this today. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much, Dr. Christine. Good to see you.
You too. Talk
Talk
soon.
soon. Bye.